welcome back to my channel. I'm Mel, I'm an Uruguayan neuroscientist, and on the side of my PhD I have this YouTube channel in which I interview scientists from all over the world. And today's guest is Stephanie Coronado-Montoya, and her research topic and what she's going to tell us today is about cannabis and psychosis. There's a link there, and more specifically she is working on developing an application that people that use cannabis can have in their cell phones, and maybe this gives them some information, helps them keep track of certain events or certain symptoms, and overall to make this experience a bit safer for people, especially for people that have certain predispositions to something that relates to psychosis. Okay, so hello Stephanie, welcome. It's very nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak here. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, tell us a bit about yourself first.
So my name is Stephanie Coronado-Montoya. So my background is a little bit weird, but essentially I come from a Peruvian immigrant family who moved to Canada. So my first language is French, and then we moved to Miami, and then that's where I was raised. So raised speaking Spanish and English, and I was able to do my bachelor's in Florida. So I did my bachelor's in psychology at University of Florida. And then I moved to Canada, back to Canada, to Montreal to do my master's of psychiatry at McGill University, where I basically looked at bias and mindfulness. And then I went on to a Francophone university also in Montreal to do my PhD, which is what I'm currently doing. So I'm doing a PhD in biomedical sciences at University of Montreal. And here I'm looking at cannabis and mental health.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. And this field of cannabis research, how does it work? What kind of stuff can you do here?
Very new. The opportunities are pretty big in terms of what you can investigate and everything. My lab is looking at both sides of the coin. So we're looking at the pros of cannabis, what possible benefits there could be in healthy people. What possible cons there could be in healthy people. We're also looking at very vulnerable populations and seeing how cannabis affects them. You can also work in animal research and basic research, looking into the effects of cannabis on these animals. There's, I would say, endless opportunities, but my focus, especially coming from a psychology and psychiatry background, is much more in terms of putting in protective measures or programs for people who are actually vulnerable to the harms of cannabis, which is not everyone, by the way. That's one of my biggest life goals, contribute to helping the most vulnerable populations. And this is why this topic interested me specifically, was because cannabis, well, we don't know much about it, but the little that we do know, one of the most flagrant facts, I would say, is that cannabis does put at risk people with psychosis. So we don't know if it causes it, or we don't know if psychosis causes the cannabis use. But that being said, we know that people who have psychotic disorders and who smoke cannabis or use cannabis tend to have much worse outcomes than people who don't. So they have increased hospitalizations, more positive symptoms, more hallucinations, for example. And living with a psychotic disorder is already hard enough, So if you add on to this layer of, you have your psychotic disorder to manage and everything, but on top of that, your cannabis use comes along with negative impacts such as cannabis use disorder, more hospitalizations. Life just gets really hard. And so what we've discovered is that there's not actually that many programs or interventions that have been tested for this population. So now, for example, in Canada in 2018, we legalized cannabis, which was a very good public health measure, in my opinion, to take. But given that it doesn't affect everyone equally and everything, or let's say that the majority of people who smoke cannabis won't have long-term harms. However, people with psychosis do need this help of having interventions or programs that are effective. And there's actually not that many programs in place. So this is why I was super interested in taking a part of these projects and contributing to this field specifically.
What kind of work do you do? Does it relate to this?
Yeah, so the last part of my PhD project is actually building this mobile application that utilizes the harm reduction approach to help people with psychosis manage their cannabis use. So I think it's pretty cool because normally a lot of the interventions traditionally that we've used for people who use cannabis, and whether it's problematic use or not, have been more abstinence focused. And abstinence for a very risky or stigmatized behavior is not necessarily the best option, because sure, okay, let's say if you're having risky sexual behaviors and we're stop, just stop it. It's not good for you. You already have this problem, and you should just stop. Great in theory, but in an actual practice, this can be really difficult for people. It's the same thing for people who use cannabis. even though they know that it's worsened outcomes and everything, having a therapist just say like, listen, we need you to stop, might not be interesting to them, might not be appealing to them, might not be realistic to them. So this is why I really enjoy the project that I'm doing, which is using that harm reduction approach, because it feels like we're doing like a lower barrier, more realistic, more interesting kind of intervention for them, where we're saying like, okay, you use cannabis, you know that it brings bad outcomes and everything. You do know this. And if not, like we give them the information. Here's some techniques that are better when you use cannabis. For example, don't smoke before work, don't smoke on weekends, don't smoke before driving, use products with less THC. All of these are examples. And then through our app, we give them that psychoeducation. So we give them different strategies and we tell them about the potential harms and everything. But then we also teach them to set goals. And then we teach them to set goals that would be interesting to them in terms of harm reduction. And so for example, they're like, okay, well, I just want to smoke once every Monday instead of 4 times. Okay, that's good. No judgment. That's what you want to do. Let's focus on getting you there. And so this is like a very nice stepping stone that can help people better manage their cannabis use and ultimately have a safer life, healthier lifestyle, I would say.
Well, this is a really good idea, a really cool app. And I want to ask, at what point are you with it? Are you developing it? Are you testing it? Or is it already running? And also, I mean, you mentioned to give the person some tips or tricks, or like, okay, let's discuss your situation and maybe we can find a middle point. Then are there like active counselors in the app, or is it everything is automatized, or like how does this work?
Mm-hmm. So we've been developing, my team and I, we've been developing this app for the past 1.5 years, and it's a lot of work. Let me tell you, it's so much work. It's like a collaboration between the technology team and also the psychologists on the team. We're also working with patient partners. We're also doing, and it's a national, we're going to be testing this in a national trial. So it takes coordinating with the site. It's a humongous project. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, a lot of development.
Super cool though.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's super cool. Like we get to talk to all these different kinds of people. However, the process is long. So in the past 1.5 years, we've managed to develop all the content for the intervention because it's one of the first of its kind for this population. So there's not that many cannabis preventive interventions. There's no harm reduction preventive interventions that I know of, according to my literature review, for people with psychosis specifically. So in that sense, it's very new. We're using a lot of the approaches that are used in substance research, and we're applying it to this. So we developed the content from zero using a lot of the evidence that we had. And we developed the app with the technology team. That was another step. And now we've finally recruited all of the sites across Canada. And so now, as of, I think last week or maybe this week, we're starting the trial to actually test, is this feasible? Is this acceptable? Is this of interest? And we're also going to be looking at if it can elicit change.
That's really, really cool. Like so exciting. Maybe later you can expand it to some other conditions, no? But so basically the questions are, so if I use the app and I don't have in particular that condition, does it still help me? Like that gives me some useful tips?
It could eventually be adapted to other populations. Basically, there's certain things that are very specific to people with psychosis. Like, okay, we know that, you can have hallucinations and stuff. How to manage this with cannabis use. So there's very psychosis specific content in there, but it's already a building block, and it's got a lot of materials, tools, articles that can be used for people without. So it would be, first, we're going to see if it works at all. If it works, then yeah, we could apply it. And that being said, actually, so in order to build this app, one of the first steps that we did as well was we're creating what we created, and we're implementing a national survey of patient preferences. So we're basically all around the country. So in Canada, we're asking a lot of people with psychosis, what do you want in a cannabis-focused intervention? And we're doing it through a quantitative survey that can give us really clear ideas of, okay, this is what they want. If it's an app, if it's online rather than in person, they're more likely to get it. Like, we're going to get very interesting results.
Yes, because I forgot to mention, but also some people may use it for a therapeutic effect, and you could maybe also have like a feature or something for that. So yeah, it's very nice. It has a lot of potential.
Thanks. Yeah, we hope so. We think so too. We're doing it with the best of the evidence that we have so far, and we'll see. All of the content has been developed and consulted with patient partners. So people who have psychosis who use cannabis, I've been working with them closely. Well, me and my team have been working very closely with them, asking them like, is this content even pertinent to you? Is this relevant? Is this realistic? Do you like even small things like, do you like the colors of the app? You know, is it user friendly? Is it things like that? So this is going to be something I think and hope that will really help engage participants to use the app and for it to be more useful to them as well.
Wow, this is very important work, and we didn't explicitly say it, but I guess that you also in this app, you're giving information to the people that are consuming cannabis, and I guess like all over the world happens. Maybe there's a lot of misinformation out there, or people don't know what to trust, and I think this is also a good aspect of it. And I know that you have this Instagram, the Brain Diaries, in which you share information about your work and scientific-based information. But can you tell us maybe how you handle this?
Yeah, sure. That's something that's been really interesting since I've started my PhD, as I've become a cannabis researcher. And I never thought I was going to be that, but that's who I am now. And I think it's actually, it's very interesting because the more I study it and everything, the more, well, first of all, I'm always on the lookout for cannabis information. And like you said, there's a lot of cannabis misinformation out there. You know, the number of times I've heard people tell me like, oh yeah, cannabis, yeah, weed helps with anxiety and stress and this and that. And like, I don't know, like, if you just tell me like that, I'm like, well, I don't really know. Let me look into the research. And often when I look into the research, it's very like early in the stages, you know, or you know, many of the trials are saying that it didn't work. And there's like one trial or two trials that said, yes, it did work. So this to me was like a big concern because I had my scientific world where we were all like, okay, super early in the research. We don't know what's going on yet. Can it help with this? Can it, you know, like asking ourselves those scientific questions. And then I go to the real world and everybody's like, weed will save the world. I'm like, wait a second, huh? Like what? There's like a disconnect here. So so that was kind of concerning to me. And now, especially in the pandemic era where we saw a lot of misinformation about vaccines and all that, it had me thinking about like, what can we do? What can we do as researchers? Because I can share all of my publications on cannabis on Facebook and Instagram, but who is going to read that? Like, these are very big words. They're not very interesting. They're very like scientific and everything. So that's kind of where I got this idea of creating the Brain Diaries, where I was like, look, there's a need to talk about it, but like from a scientific perspective, but from also a perspective that you can actually read, you know, like a non-scientific person can actually see the information and be like, oh, these are words that make sense to me, you know, not like the protocol was developed using this and this, and it's a randomized control trial. Like, what are we even saying? So that's kind of where it came from, you know, this idea and this like desire for me to really be able to translate, you know, that research into real talk, into stuff that people could actually use. And so I've been doing on my Instagram, I've been taking different questions that I hear often, like, does cannabis help with anxiety? And I look at the literature and then I basically summarize in a more informal and hopefully engaging way, in hopes that people can actually have the information, you know, in a way that makes sense to them and is more interesting, you know, that I don't care, like if you're reading in the bathroom or whatever, I don't care, as long as the information actually gets to you, you know? So that's my hopes with the Brain Diaries, and it's kind of expanding into talking about different substances and mental health, and yeah.
Yes, that is very important work. Very nice that you have this Instagram and you take this time, because it's true. Since you are in this business of sharing the right information, do you have any tips that come to mind for either people consuming cannabis, or how to manage their consumption better? Like maybe something general that you can say from your knowledge, or also what about the science students? No, this is a new field that is emerging. Maybe, I don't know if you have some words for them.
Like I said before, this research field is super new. There's so many gaps, there's so many opportunities right now, that if this is something, and I would say in substance use research in general, but now especially with like the cannabis legalization, there's so many opportunities. So if you're looking for a little niche to get yourself into, you know, to get comfortable in, cannabis research is definitely a good one to get into. I find that there's so much work to be done, and it's pretty important. In terms of generally people who use cannabis, like I said before, it's not risky for everyone, right? So there's a lot of people who can use it recreationally and have no long-term effects, according to the science. But if you do find that your weed use is kind of, you know, bothering you on the day-to-day, you're having memory lapses, you're having trouble concentrating, you're having these kind of things, it could be a good idea to start looking at ways to manage your cannabis use in a way that's safer for you. So one super, super good tool is called the Lower Risk Cannabis Use Guidelines. I find it very straightforward. It gives, I think, 9 to 11 guidelines that basically suggest how to use cannabis in a way that won't affect your life too much. Generally in the science, what we know is that abstinence for sure will be the best solution every time because there's no effects short term, medium term, or long term. But that aside, if you're pregnant or you have a history of psychosis or a family history of psychosis, it's definitely discouraged because it can bring pretty negative consequences for you. Otherwise, there's just like general tips like, you know, if your weed use is bothering you or you think it might be impairing your life, taking products that have lower THC, for example, that would be one of them. If you're in a country where it's legal, taking it from a legal supplier where the product will be cleaner. Not driving and not consuming before driving, for example, not consuming before working because that could result in work problems. So there's like definitely a few general guidelines that could help you continue to use if that's what you want, but in putting yourself out of situations that are risky. Two things that really have helped me get far in my career, in my opinion, I got far so far, is getting as much research experience if you want to get in the research field in something that might potentially interest you. And whether or not it interests you at the end, it will be very useful experience for the future. And also focusing on getting good grades too in your undergrad, simply because these two things, research experience and good grades, are what have allowed me to get far in terms of scholarships too. So, for example, right now I have the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship, which in Canada is one of the most prestigious scholarships that you can receive. And how I got this was because since the beginning, I've focused on getting good grades and, you know, getting the experience, getting good reference letters. And there was that. And there was also, and this is my second piece of advice, is as corny as it sounds, I think you should believe in yourself as much as you can and push and aim really high, because Vanier was a clear example for me. If I hadn't tried for it, I never would have gotten it. And a lot of the people I knew around me, because it's such an ambitious scholarship, decided not to because they didn't think they were competitive enough. So if you never try, you're not going to get it, you know? So even though it took a lot of work and at times I didn't believe in myself anymore, and some people around me were like, really, is it really worth all that work? It is. It's 100% worth all that work, because if you get it, then you win, and it just builds on itself and builds on itself. And so I would say those two things, like really focus early on. All of your efforts do matter, but also do believe that you can get as far as you want to, because if you do believe in yourself, you can get that far. Anyway, that's really corny, but I do think it's important to mention every now and then. Like, let other people close the door for you, you know, if you must. If they want to close the door on you, well, that's too bad, but don't do it yourself, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this has been very interesting, very different to any other interview that I have been doing in my channel, because someone that is in such a fresh field and developing an app and that is so applicable to people, that this is really cool. But I think those were all the questions I have for you today. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for being here with us. I really appreciate it. It was really cool to have you. And I hope that your app goes really well and that we see it everywhere very soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mel. It was really a pleasure to be able to speak with you. And like I said, again, I think it's very interesting what you do. And it's actually one of the first opportunities I have to share my research with the Spanish population, which is great because my whole family is not sure what I'm doing. So they'll finally be able to hear what I'm saying.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your attention. If you liked the video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, to give a thumbs up. I also have a Patreon account in which you can make monthly donations. Every time I have Patreon contributions, I work with freelancers in Latin America, so you could be part of that. And that's it for today. Keep checking out the channel, the playlist. Probably there are videos that you are interested in and you didn't see yet. And see you in the next video. Bye bye.